Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto. Welcome back to Private Practice Journeys. This week I have Debby Simmons on the podcast episode, and if any of you have been interested in personal branding, how is it that you brand yourself, that you make yourself stand out in the community, help people know what you're all about as a practitioner? Well, you want to listen to this because Debby has a real interesting story behind the naming of her practice and how she selected her logo, and that's all around this idea of personal branding. So I think you'll like this and the other things that she discusses on today's podcast episode. So without further ado, here's Debby. Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto. Welcome back to Private Practice Journeys. And joining me today is Debby Simmons. And Debby, welcome back.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, I wanted to let everyone know, some of the Journey followers might remember that you're located out in California. And of course, there have been a lot of fires out there for the last several weeks. And I'm wondering if you could just kind of update us on that, and then we'll dive into our podcast interview for today.
Sure. So I'm out in Burlingame, California, which is just a little bit south of San Francisco, kind of near the airport. And Santa Rosa is about an hour and a half away. At Napa, about an hour and a half as well. So we're not that far from everything. So when the fires broke out, it was the way that I found out about it was really weird. It's like my husband calls me and he says, and I just called him back. I didn't even check his text. And he says, did you get my text? And I says, no. He goes, well, Santa Rosa is burning down. And my aunt lives in Santa Rosa.
Oh, no.
And so I just said, okay, I got to call her. And so that was sort of how it started. And I didn't really know at that point what was happening. There were all kinds of rumors going around about what happened and how these things got started and everything. So that was scary. So I had called her. She had evacuated. The fire was behind her house at 2 a.m, like 2 blocks behind her house.
Oh my
so
gosh.
They evacuated. And they went to my cousin's house, who lives in Santa Rosa, and they were able to stay there till the next morning. So then when I learned about the fires, what basically happened, all of the city of Santa Rosa is like a war zone at this point. Sonoma County is all pretty bad. They're still dealing with smoke. Napa, I know a lot of bad stuff happened. Some wineries burned down and everything. It was pretty bad.
Wow.
So it was, for a week, we didn't really know if one of the houses was standing or not. One of my employees, my person who worked with me at Primrose, they just bought a house up in Santa Rosa or Sonoma County, and they had to evacuate, and they just moved in August.
Oh my gosh.
So they had to evacuate twice. But everybody is okay, and at my end, nobody has lost any homes or anything like that. So that part was good. But there's so much loss. I had a client who came in about a week ago. He was a police officer, and he was deployed up to the Santa Rosa area, and he was just really nervous to go. And then when he got back, he just was describing how terrible it was, and it was just really processing what the experience was like. So it's been really tough for so many people.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to hear that your family's safe and secure.
Thank you. Yeah.
But my gosh, I just can't imagine going through an experience like that. In Tennessee here, we deal with tornadoes a lot here in my area, but fire just as bad, just as devastating, and it's just so horrible to hear. Now, have the fires, are they under control now?
They're under control, but they're still not out. They're still burning. So some of them are, the worst ones are 90% contained, but then other ones seem to keep popping up in different areas. So it's just, it's affected so many people, obviously, in terms of even my practice and stuff. Everybody's been so affected by this. You know, it's
Yeah.
It's going to make this Thanksgiving an interesting one for people. A lot of people are already talking about that. They want to be with family
Sure.
for Thanksgiving. They want to be grateful for what they have
Oh,
and
yeah.
everything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It really makes you take a second look at things when stuff like that happens. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and dive in then to our, we have 3 topics for today, and I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about systems that you've used in your practice, because I think that I talked about this with Amanda recently about how sometimes we don't really give a lot of thought to systems that we use to make a go of our practices, to make our practices run efficiently, yet it's really necessary to have these in place. It's just not about doing the counseling part. I think that's the fun part that all of us like to do, but there's a lot of other things kind of in the background that we have to have in place to make sure that our practices run efficiently. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experiences, maybe some lessons you've learned about setting up systems for your practice.
Sure. I laughed when I hear that question because this is it's a work in progress for sure. So the first thing that I thought about when I started bringing people on is what are we going to do for a consistent a phone system? What are we going to do?
Right.
And so I looked into a variety of different phone systems and kind of not knowing even what was out there at that point in terms of that. And so I learned a lot. And you do not need to spend a whole lot of money on getting elaborate phone systems. I mean, we are totally up in the cloud with our phone system.
Oh, okay.
And so we've, and there are a lot of cloud-based things as well. So that was a huge thing. And then learning that, and then every time that there's a new person that comes on, it's actually pretty simple at my end at this point. I just sort of go on the computer and add in a new extension, and then they have to go in and but there's a little training that has to go on with each person who comes on to learn the phone system. But it's actually pretty simple. The other thing was basically our practice management and billing kinds of things. So I had one that was going on with my basically with my personal practice. Okay. And sorry, my doorbell just rang.
I'm hearing a lot of sounds on my end.
I know. I'm so sorry. I hope you can edit some of this. So anyway, so I had, so let me back up. So the practice management piece of it is really important. And I was trying to take what I was doing with my own individual practice, and I'm trying to just sort of implement new people into that. And so what I did with each person who I implemented into the new system was the system itself has a 30-day free trial for each new clinician coming on. So I told each clinician to go and to basically play with the system first, because I didn't want to pay to bring them on until they knew it. So each of them did a 30-day free trial. And now we've implemented that, and I've only implemented it for practitioners who have 3 or more clients, just to make sure that it's cost effective. So I've still got about my 4 solid people are on it, and I've got 3 who are still learning the system, and I hope to implement later. But what that does is it basically is you can schedule appointments, you can take notes, you can bill your clients, you can do everything through that if you choose to do that. So, but that was a learning process for sure for me.
And what electronic health record system do you use in your practice, Debbie?
The one that I use is Simple Practice.
Okay, all right. So,
and clearly there's a learning curve, but it is simple.
Well, that sounds like an oxymoron.
I know, right? I know, right?
Well, let me ask, because I do want to remind the Journey followers that you're the only one of the 4 therapists who is in group practice, and you had been in individual practice for many years, started this group practice, so that's the new part for you. Now, let me go back to your phone system. How did you figure out what kind of a phone system you wanted to use and figure out the one that you're using is the best one for you guys?
Well, I started with, I really didn't know where to start at this point, but I'm like, clearly I knew I could call, AT&T or Comcast and get something set up. But
right.
I also knew that was going to be really expensive.
Yeah.
And then I had a fax, an online fax company that I was already using, and I knew that they had done some cloud-based stuff. And I checked with them, and then once I realized what I was starting to look for in terms of cloud-based, I basically just started looking around. I just did my own search.
Yep.
And the one, and I called a lot of people, and they were just so expensive. And I'm like, I don't know that I need to pay this kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came across one. Do you want me to say which one it was?
Sure.
Okay. So the one that I came across was Grasshopper.
Okay.
And I've heard, read the reviews, heard, mixed things from people. But for our needs, Grasshopper works really, really well. It's a system that you set up extension. Everybody's got their own extension. You have a voicemail. A client calls, and the voicemail goes to each individual's, each therapist's voicemail and email, so they can read it. It's just you can fax through it. You can do so many things, and it's like the price is like incredibly reasonable.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, why am I going to pay more for? There probably are other sophisticated things that we could be doing, but
right.
I don't know that we need to be doing them.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of what we went with. And that way, everybody the thing what I wanted is for every therapist to have the same phone number on their business card for Primrose Healing and Wellness.
Sure.
And that's what we have.
Okay. So you've got the most bang for the buck. It sounds like you've.
I think so.
You have done something that's very cost efficient, which I assume especially when you're running a group practice, you've really got to start keeping a closer eye on finances, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm paying for everything. In order to have them work for me, I'm paying for everything.
Exactly. Right. So that's a lot different. So there are different challenges that you have as a group practice owner than you do as an individual practice owner. So that's good stuff to know. Okay, so right. Simple Practice for the electronic health record system and Grasshopper. And I'll put links in the show notes if anybody wants to check those out. And I think you can get the 30-day free trial. I think they have that going on pretty much all of the time, don't they? Like if you just want to,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they totally do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit.
And
go ahead.
I don't work for these companies. I'm not promoting them. It's just truly my personal experience. That's
your disclaimer, huh?
Right.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about personal branding, Debbie. And I think you've been in this field long enough to know that there are certain things that you need to do as a private practitioner to brand yourself, to make yourself known in the community. But now that you've started this group private practice, I wonder if you've had to do things differently, or how you've had to go about this process of branding yourself as a group, and how maybe that differs from how you did that as an individual.
Sure. Actually, it's been much easier as a group.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I was an individual, I started out just sort of under my name, Debby Simmons, MFT, and there's no branding there. It was just me, right?
Uh-huh.
But then eventually I started, or at one point I had a niche, and it was eating disorders. And so that sort of became my niche. And what I started doing there was the approach that I was taking to working with people with eating disorders was definitely a very holistic approach. And I looked at what didn't work, why treatment did not work with people with eating disorders.
Okay.
And I was going to make some changes. So I was doing that in my private practice. So I'm saying, okay, it's a very holistic approach, and it was working very well. So when I moved to the idea of a group practice, that actually happened. I think I mentioned this probably in the very first time that we talked. I went to a workshop for therapists, and somebody got up and they talked about this group practice idea that they were doing, and I was very intrigued by it. So I went and talked to him after the fact and realized that maybe I could do this. I already had 2 interns working for me, so I kind of had a group practice. And then I came home and I was sort of thinking, what could I do what could the branding be? And I thought, this holistic approach that I have towards eating disorders, this isn't just towards eating disorders, this is towards everything. So I'm like, but why not build on that? Let's do a holistic approach to treatment. And so that sort of built. And then, so I'm like, okay, I got this idea. This I know I want to do. Then it became, okay, well, what am I going to name this place? Well, the first thought, so I was out literally walking around or 6 o'clock in the morning, getting a cup of coffee before I went to work and thinking, the street that we are on in Burlingame is Primrose. Okay, well, let's work with that. And then, so I started with, it just sort of came up, okay, Primrose Healing and Wellness. Well, that's all fine and well, as long as I always stay on Primrose. What happens if I move?
Right.
And then I thought, well, wait a second. Primrose has a greater meaning to it. And the primrose flower and primrose oils, those are all healing oils. So I looked up the primrose flower, and it's a Chinese healing flower.
Is
and
that
I'm like, that's
right?
Perfect. Yep.
I never knew that.
Yeah. So the primrose, the primrose flower, and if anybody looks on my website, they'll see the logo, which is the primrose flower. That became our logo, and that could be carried with us anywhere. So we are Primrose Healing and Wellness, which carries with it not just the holistic approach to therapy, but that's how it evolved. If we're going to do healing and wellness, and we're going to do the Chinese flower, we're going to have, massage oils available to massage therapists and Reiki, and so that's how everything evolved.
How cool. Well, so you had started off doing this more in a narrow type of way, just with the eating disorder folks, as an individual practitioner, but then you thought, this could work really well in a group practice, and why not just expand this to use this approach with all clients? And boy, what a great way of branding your practice. That's a very distinct way of making yourself known, your practice known, and actually to differentiate yourself from other private practices. And, and I don't know, and you may have talked about this before, Debbie, about in California where you're located. I'm not sure if this is a popular type of therapy approach, for mental health practitioners to kind of do this, or if this is something that's more unique.
I think that people in general want, out in California, that they really would say that they're taking a holistic approach. I don't know. I know of one other center about 50 miles from here where she's trying to develop something similar, but I don't know of any center that offers anything that we have in terms of combining the massage, the Reiki, all of the holistic kinds of stuff for people. I don't know that anybody does that.
Yeah, that's really neat. So this is a real way of making yourself unique within your community, and it's something that people want and are going to be attracted to. So that's really cool too. Yeah. So is there any advice you would give people just looking at, just in terms of branding, or sometimes we all make mistakes in trying to do the branding thing, but any kind of advice you could give to people who are thinking about going into private practice, just along the branding, in the branding area?
I think it's about really trusting your instincts and not rushing the thought. I've got another project that I'm going right now, and I'm trying to do some branding for, and it's like I'm trying to do it really quickly and it's not coming. I think it has to come organically. And like I said, I was out there sort of walking around having coffee, and and I really believe, for me, so much of what I do, it's like, it's kind of it's a God thing. And that's who I am. And that's what I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, whether you believe in God or the universe or whatever it is, I just think it'll come to you if you're open to it.
Yes.
Then you take the different pieces and you fit them all together.
That's a really good point. Right now I guess it was last week, I was looking at my own branding and thinking about doing some things a little bit differently. And something came to mind that I thought, oh man, this is a great idea. And I just wanted to do something with it that day and just, go all guns with this thing. But, what I found as I've gotten older is, okay, let's kind of pull back the reins a little bit. Let's just kind of let this simmer and think about it. And, it's so fascinating, Debbie, that when I allow things just to kind of work at their own pace, don't try to rush it, and just kind of let it simmer, that new things will actually come up that actually make the original idea much better. And so I've just got to have the patience and just kind of allow it to happen and not rush it. So I think that's a real good piece of advice that you gave there. So, well, let's talk about this last topic for today, Debbie, which is learning about keeping things in perspective. What kind of perspective do you have to keep in mind about yourself as a private practitioner, as well as your journey into private practice during your first year of practice? What kind of things do you think you need to keep in mind along those lines?
Slow down.
Yeah.
I am at a place right now. This whole thing is, for me, has taken off. We only opened the doors technically under Primrose in January.
Yeah.
And I've now got like 8 people working for me. It's just,
oh my gosh.
And it's great. It's really great. So actually 2 things. So one is slow down, because I feel like I'm running a marathon and I'm not taking enough time for myself, and I need to really do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one piece, but it's not like I'm really stressed out or anything. It's just that there's just so many things happening.
Right.
The other thing that I really learned that I was real learning experience, that was when I was hiring people. So I have my team, and I have a wonderful team. We work together. We're a family. These are not just independent people working, everybody working on their own. We all work together.
Wonderful.
So at one point, what I did was I wanted to bring one more person onto the team and expand one more dimension of wellness. Mm-hmm. And I did that. And so she came on, and it was not a good fit. And I knew it. I could feel the energy. The people there, they didn't like this other way that things were going to go. Mm-hmm. She was not a good fit for the group. And so finally, it was after a staff meeting, and she had left, had to leave early, and I said to what's going on? And they basically said to me, she's not a fit here. It's not going to work. We're not going to refer people to her. Mm-hmm. And they had already been talking about it, and I'm like, oh my God, you guys, why didn't you say something to me? Yeah. And they thought, we thought she was like a friend of yours. And I go, no. So we had a big discussion, and as it turned out, I had to basically let her go, which was horrible. But what I learned from that, from the team, is that because I'm the clinical director of the center, I'm not the one who makes decisions about who's going to come on board. It's got to be a group effort, because I have such a good group right now, and what we have works well. Everybody needs to be part of the decision-making process in terms of how we're going to move forward. Mm-hmm. And they taught me that, and that has been a valuable lesson. And but it also makes me feel like I'm not in this alone. We really do work together. Right.
Well, that's an interesting. It's interesting that you have the perspective of where this is all done as a team, as a group, and it's just not you who's making the decision as the director. So it sounds like you are very intentional about this, that this is something that you feel very strongly about, that in this place, in this practice, this is the way that things are done, and you don't want to mess things up. I don't blame you at all.
No,
I mean,
no.
you have got such a good thing going there, Debbie, and I could totally understand that, bringing in the wrong person could really mess up those dynamics, and that's not something that you want, because ultimately you want to serve the client. I mean, that's really who it really boils down to in the end. And of course, anything that messes with that and with the group dynamics, you don't want anything like that to hurt what you do with your clients.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great advice. So, well, listen. Let me get some information out there to the Journey followers who are interested in learning more about you and your practice, and if they have maybe an inkling just to contact you about group practice, and maybe they want to go into group practice and might want to pick your brain, how could people get a hold of you?
So our website is primrosehealingandwellness.com. And on the website, there's all of our contact information. There's also a Facebook badge there that I really highly recommend that you click on, because every day we're posting on Facebook new things that are going on, inspirational things, whatever it might be. So definitely, go that way, and our phone number and everything is there. And you know what? I actually did have somebody, I think somebody called me recently who was interested who had heard the Journey podcast.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of neat.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really neat to be able to connect people, through this podcast. So that's a wonderful thing. Well, listen, thanks for coming on again, Debbie. I really appreciate just your participation this whole year. It's been a real fun thing that we're doing here, and pretty soon, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing a podcast episode in November, but definitely in December, when I want all four of you to be on with me, where we can have a conversation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
fun,
and that'll be really cool. Just to kind of talk to one another, because you guys haven't gotten the opportunity to do that. So,
No.
So
That'd be great.
Yeah. So, well, listen. Until we speak again, you have a great rest of the day.
All right, Chris. You take care. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Glad that Debbie could join me today on the Private Practice Journeys podcast episode. Wasn't that really cool what she was talking about in terms of the primrose flower, and how she selected that as her logo? And it really represents not only who she is, but really her practice and what she's trying to communicate to the community about what her practice is all about. And oftentimes people are looking for more than just the traditional counseling option. They want a more well-rounded approach to healing and wellness. And that's what her practice is all about. So it's really nice to see how she came about that. And I think that that's something that you can do too. Just give some thought to who you are, how you want to be known in your community. And like Debbie said, it's an organic process. It takes some time, but it'll come to you. Well, if you like the show notes for today's podcast episode, please visit my website, chrisquarto.com, and just click on podcast, and you'll be able to find the notes for today's episode and past episodes, as well as if you want to listen to past podcast episodes. They're all there. And we're only going to have a few more of these episodes, Private Practice Journeys episodes, and then it'll be done. So it was a nice podcast series, and looking forward to the remaining ones we have left. So hope you guys have a great rest of the week.